Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Over the past several days, 3 females have been found dead.
Looks like someone's going after these girls.
Then they have to know to watch their backs.
Streaming now.
You really want what happened to this woman happened to you?
Exactly why I need to keep going on this.
Starring Emmy Award winner Amanda Seyfried.
I'm worried about what you're gonna find. So am I.
Long Bright River. A limited series. Streaming now. Only on Peacock.
Today, the beverage aisle looks a lot different than it used to. America's beverage companies are working together. We're delivering the options everyone wants. In fact, nearly 60% of beverages Americans buy have zero sugar. You'll find more variety than ever, including more of your favorites, now available with zero sugar. You'll also find more sizes and clear calorie information on the front of every can, bottle, and pack. We know when it comes to finding balance, the more choices, the better.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
At the Musial with Alan and Daniel, we'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shopta at C70. No update from Alan Medlock this week. He's had family issues that have kept him away from both the team and from recording. But filling in on the other side tonight, it's Dayn Perry. You know him from CBS Sports. You know him hopefully from Birdy Work. You should be subscribed to that. Dayn, how are you tonight?
Mr. Shoptaw, I am well. Good to be with you.
And we're here on a momentous occasion, the day that the Cardinals finally sign a free agent. I don't know about you, but I mean, I feel like you got to break out the champagne or something, because this is the day we've been waiting for.
Mr. Maton, however he pronounces it. But yeah, I mean, it's, this was rumored last offseason. So Now we finally get our veteran right-handed Ursit's Andrew Kittredge to help the cause in 2025.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a $2 million deal, and it's not exactly something that people are going to or should get too terribly worked up about, I don't think. It's not some of the signings that we saw late last year, but it's still a little bit interesting, right? I mean, I mean, the fact that the Cardinals have gone out and gotten this veteran in a year that is supposed to be this, development year. I think there are ways to explain it, but it also comes across as still mixing metaphors to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to cost a young guy a spot in the bullpen to start the season. I guess Graceffo, obviously, since he was sent down to minor league camp today. So, but on the other side of thing, I do get the need for bullpen depth and, a veteran arm out there, as much of a known quantity as relievers can be, I suppose. So it does make some sense. I find the timing a little interesting considering it happened the day after, Derek Gould interviewed Tony Clark, and he all but called out the Cardinals for not signing any major league free agents this offseason. So the next day they, lo and behold, do that. I don't know that there's any causation there. It's probably just coincidence because, we've heard the Phil Maton rumors for, I don't know how long, but it's, I would characterize it as ultimately harmless, which is, I guess it could be worse, I guess it could be ultimately harmful, but so yeah, this isn't of great importance. I think it's fine. It's nothing I don't think anyone should be overly excited about it or overly angry about it either way.
Yeah. I think it gives a little bit, and it's something that I've talked about a little bit, wondering how development was going to work this year. And I think it's showing us that they are going to be content with leaving people in the minor leagues to develop rather than, feeling like they have to push them up to fill a need at the major league level. And, I think that can be good for some of these guys. I don't know about Graceffo. I think, he's pitched a lot in Memphis, so I don't know that was a great thing to move him down. But there are other players that probably need that time and not have to think about, well, one injury and I'm in the big leagues.
Yeah, and this is also a situation, as they're probably getting some different looks in terms of coaching, since given all the turnover and staff additions as part of the reset, and and part of the renewed emphasis on the player development apparatus and that sort of thing. So I suppose it's not just running it back with the same old coaching, the same old advice, and that kind of thing. I think they will get some different inputs, and maybe that will accrue to their benefit. I don't know, but I think the what was expressly stated is that guys like Gorman and Jordan Walker, the most important long-term pieces, if you will get that uninterrupted run, and that still appears to be the case. With pitching, it's a little more complicated, and I do, we'll see these guys trickle in over the course of the season, I think. But Graceffo, for instance, to start, though, will, as you mentioned, be back in Memphis yet again.
Yeah, and you're right. I think that we will see some of these guys. And some of them, I don't know. Maybe, this spring has been interesting for a guy like Takoa Roby, right? I mean, I think in past years, he might have been able, you might have been able to talk yourself into, hey, he's going to, they're going to take him north because he can help them win. Obviously, they've gone ahead and sent him down because I do think, again, the development. But, is this a guy that we see again this year, or is this a guy that they are going to, really slow play to some degree?
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he spends the entire year in AAA just because all the recent health issues and how he is. It's been a long time since he's had a sustained run of success, largely because of those health issues. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them play it conservatively with him in terms of his promotion and that kind of thing. Now, if he goes out there and absolutely blows AAA away, yeah, we'll probably see him. But I think they would love to see him put together a healthy season, and kind of the same applies to T. Kent's, although he has not had the injury concerns that Roby has. He certainly had durability issues. So I think that's probably a similar situation. I would expect both those guys to see the bulk of the season at AAA at least.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on, of course, it depends, always it depends on injury, but also depends on, where this team is going in June, July, and most notably with those veterans at the end of that rotation. If they're struggling, do you see a way that the Cardinals, I think letting like a guy like Miles Michaelis go in June is very against what we know as the Cardinal way, but things are changing.
Yeah, that is one of the things. That's a subplot I'm going to be very interested to see. If Michaelis struggles badly, I don't want that to happen because I want the Cardinals to win this season, given how things are. But if he does struggle badly, which I don't think would surprise any of us, are they going to have that difficult conversation with the veteran player, which they are always loath to do, and make him the long man in the bullpen, or cut bait on him? I imagine you probably have a similar opinion in that I'll believe it when I see it. If they actually cut bait on him should his performance merit that, or if they, I guess the alternative is to move him to the bullpen. Maybe they'll have that conversation with him. I don't know. I have my doubts, but it's one of those things I'm interested to see if all the staff turnover and this, supposedly new vision leads to a more of a willingness to have difficult conversations with tenured veterans.
Yeah. I mean, they let Brandon Crawford go early last year, but
Yeah.
they also let Brandon Crawford stay around a lot longer than most of us
Right.
would have either. And he was a guy that, he had a reputation and he was a veteran, but he only had those few days basically in St. Louis versus
Yeah.
Michaelis, who is, I mean, one of the longest tenured Cardinals that are around right now. And a Cardinal that made them feel really good when he came over from Japan and they've kind of patted themselves on the back, I think, a lot for scouting him, and I feel like that buys him a lot of cachet.
Probably so. Yeah. There's definitely that dynamic in play. I have no doubt.
Yeah. Now there's also, I guess the third option is that phantom IL stint that, there's something wrong. We just don't know what it is. So we're going to put him on the injured list and he plays out the string that way.
You can stick any pitcher in an MRI tube and find what you need to find.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's probably not a single healthy pitcher in Major League Baseball right now. So that's, you can always find something. Here we are getting, 2 weeks from today, opening day.
Yeah.
It starts to become real, I guess, to some degree. Is this about the time where you're kind of paying a little bit more attention to what happens?
I am a pretty obsessive follower of spring box scores and that sort of thing, and read the PD's coverage every day and that kind of thing. This is the time when I start getting antsy and okay, this has been a lot of spring training. Let's do this for real now. I understand that's not going to happen, but I understand how long spring training is. But I do get restless around this time, and I get warmer weather here in Chicago, so I'm ready to go.
So, as we've seen especially the last few days, but it's kind of it's been a running theme all spring. Has been a sputtering offense, which is something that we have seen for a number of years, really. But do you take anything from that? Is it? I mean, it's always weird to try to read the tea leaves in spring, but it does feel like with a new hitting coach, you would have liked to seen some results maybe in the spring.
Yeah, obviously you'd rather have them than not have them, but there's so many guys undergoing at least like micro tweaks to their swing and that kind of thing that I think it does take a little while to groove that and put it in muscle memory and that sort of thing. So I don't pay too much attention to what's going on with that. And I'm also, like a lot of people, of the belief that that hitters tend to be behind hitters in spring training. And so I worry about the games when they count, and I worry about the outcome when they count. I do get now the spring training numbers. I do put a little more emphasis on are those guys who are absolutely fighting for jobs and roster spots. If those guys are not performing, then maybe I'm more inclined to read something to that. But the guys who have secure spots and may just be working on things or getting up to speed, I don't worry about it too much. So that's not a huge concern for me right now.
And I think it goes to that. I've got the stats kind of pulled up right here, and they're sorted by home run. And the top 3 home run guys are Luken Baker, Jose Barrero, and Matt Koperniak, who are all 3 guys that, have various chances of making the roster, but nobody is secured at all.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Are you buying into any of those guys though? Like Luken Baker has had, the 3 homers, which is great, but he's also, he's hitting 280. He's got more walks than strikeouts.
Yeah.
He kind of joked about it recently that he had a good off season or something like that. How much do we take from that, do you think?
I mean, I think he is a guy who merits a roster spot. I think this team really needs a right-handed thumper on the bench, and Baker is that. And I'd like to see him get DH duty against lefties too. I think he should be as heavily used as possible. I know it's difficult because there's a lot of log jams going on in terms of position players up and down the roster, but I'd really like to see him get a spot. And it's not out of the question that he forces the issue and carves out a larger role for himself than any of us would probably anticipate. I mean, you can hit your way into forcing their hand, and he's a guy with the potential to do that. I mean, he's not young. He's at an age where he's probably at his peak level ish around there. So, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him be a useful complementary piece this season. And I think he should crack the opening day roster.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have his stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he's already been like at least 3 years, maybe parts of 4 seasons in Memphis.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot more he can do at AAA, I don't think.
Right,
And if
right.
you're not going to play him, then find a place like Pittsburgh or somebody that needs some sort of bat like this, and see what he can do over there.
Yeah, or let him go hit 53 homers in Japan or something.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah, I'd like to see him get a major league role in some fashion.
And just kind of continuing on, I think Barrero is the guy that's interesting as well, but he's not on the 40 man, and I don't know if that's enough to keep him, because I don't think anybody else that's a backup shortstop has really, laid claim to that. I guess Fermin would get it probably by default, unless you want to make a 40 man move.
This is I'm always interested by these former top prospects who never panned out and change organizations. I'm always interested to see if a different organization, new sets of coaching eyes, can get something out of them. Barrero is a guy. He was, I want to say, a consensus top 50 overall prospect at one point within the Reds organization, and I would love to see them find a way to get him on the roster, and let's see what he can do. Let's see if these new player development figures can get something out of him that hasn't been unearthed before. And I would, he's a guy I'm kind of pulling for to make the roster. Although, as you mentioned, not being on the 40 man makes it a kind of a difficult path.
Yeah. Although then again, they made a 40 man move today, releasing Bailey Horn and then trading him off for cash to Detroit. I don't know how much that was, probably $30 maybe. But yeah, I mean, so it can happen. I mean, then injuries and all that kind of stuff, it can happen. And I think it's always interesting for me to see how long these guys stick around in camp. Like we saw Roby go back just yesterday or something like that. And it's just interesting to figure out what the thinking is, to see, Quinn Matthews go back early. And I know you're running out of starts and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's still interesting to see who gets to hang around the longest and make that kind of impression.
Yeah. And I think it says something that Barrero is sticking around that long, not being on the 40 man. I think it suggests there's a real race there, and presumably there is.
Yeah. And I mean, Hellman hasn't done anything yet, and he doesn't. The Cardinals don't have they traded, I think, cash considerations there too, so it's not like they have a whole lot invested in him. It's if you swap them on the 40 man, it's not the worst thing.
Yeah, I just Hellman has his uses obviously, but I think in these kind of roles, this is where you should be taking swings, and I think Barrero is a swing that is worth taking, and let's see what he can do.
Well, and again, especially in this year of lessened expectations.
Right.
And it feels to me that the Cardinals kind of put it out there like, okay, we're going to use this as a development year, but they didn't really want to commit to it. I mean, commit to this idea that we're not going to be good and the fans are going to be okay with it. I think they had the opportunity to really say, hey, this is what we're doing. And I think fans would have bought into it more so than they would have in the past, and they still wouldn't do it.
And if anything, I kind of get a sense of opposite frustration in that. Wait, I thought we were resetting and going young. What are these guys still doing here? And that so I think that suggests a willingness, and maybe that's born of fatigue from the fans with how things have gone the last couple of seasons. But I think there's a willingness there, and I'm not sure that these fans will not tolerate a rebuild. I don't know how true that is. I think what they want is cause for optimism, and in some ways, stasis can be as bad for optimism as being terrible.
Oh yeah.
So I think there's probably, I don't know, internal fear of an absolute disaster at the gate which, obviously the Cardinals make a thing of tying payroll to that and that kind of thing.
Right.
So I don't know if that's led to some soft pedaling, if you will, but it does start to feel a bit of a half measure at some point.
Yeah, and I get that. Although they did lose a lot from the payroll as well.
Right.
So
Oh yeah.
and they stabilized their TV contract a lot faster than I think they expected to as well. So. But yeah, I mean, if the Cardinals are going to lose, win 75 games, I think people would rather see, Michael McGreevy go every fifth day than,
Right.
Miles Michaelis. Nothing against Miles, but I think you're right on the fatigue part and the idea that, there's something to build toward versus, a guy that's at the last of his career here.
Yeah. I mean, we're I try not to be this way like everyone else. I try to live in the present and savor the moment, but we are forward looking creatures, all of us. We're all thinking about the next thing to a certain extent. And I think that especially applies to baseball teams who have not succeeded at a customary level in recent times. I think we're all looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to 2 weeks. I'm looking forward to, opening day. I'm looking forward to Quinn Matthews getting there. I'm looking forward to Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman finding their levels, that sort of thing. We're all looking forward.
Well, always. I mean, that's why the prospect industry is such a huge thing now, because we're always wanting the new thing. We want to be on the ground floor of the big high rise to some degree, and we're always looking for that next guy up. So,
and I've kind of been thinking about this lately because of the emphasis on the reset and the improvements to player development and that kind of thing. I mean, most of these guys are not going to work out. Most of these guys we're excited about and thinking, all right, now they're going to get their opportunities. Now they have these, new battalion of coaches to guide them and that kind of thing. Most of them are still not going to work out. I don't have a guess of who is going to work out. I have some inclinations, but a lot of the guys we're excited about are not going to amount to much at the highest level. And that's just the nature of it. And I include myself in this. We forget this all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, look at Dylan Carlson, right? I mean, third in Rookie of the Year, and then 2 years later, he's an afterthought and gone from the organization. And I don't think when he was coming up, anybody would have expected that, right? We're always thinking, oh, he's going to be 6, 7, 8 year guy. He's going to make a couple All-Star games. I'm not going to be a superstar, but he'll be this, and no, it didn't work that way.
Right. Yeah. And, this is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's a way to keep yourself engaged and energized, getting out over your skis a little bit in terms of what this guy is going to turn into and what that guy is going to turn into. It's unrealistic, but it's also something that it's a coping mechanism, if you will, in baseball terms. And, maybe it's not the worst thing.
I mean, that's at the little bit of the romanticism of baseball too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that idea that
spring too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to grab on to this guy and he's going to, and I think the most important thing is not to take it out on the guy when he doesn't, take it out on yourself more than anything. Right.
Right.
I mean,
I guarantee you he's more upset about than you are. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Jordan Walker is a guy that we're having these discussions about.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he's going to be back soon. I was getting a little bit concerned. I thought he was going to be back like earlier this week from that.
Yeah, same.
Sprinkler head thing, and now I guess this weekend, maybe Monday. I don't remember what they're talking about now, but
I think Saturday possibility. Yeah.
Okay. But he's a guy that I wouldn't want to say that he has to do something this year, and if he doesn't take some sort of step forward this year, you really get concerned about, what does his future look like?
Right. Especially with, a new front office regime taking over in which they will presumably be willing to make the kinds of decisions that Mozeliak has shied away from recently. And, so it's an important year for a lot of these young guys to, not only for the overall arc of their careers, but also to say to, Chaim Bloom and his incoming lieutenants that, hey, I'm a part of this long term, and you need to take care of me. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's just going to be that over kind of like you were talking about subplots. That's just one of them for this year.
Yeah.
What is this changeover going to be like? What will Mo do here in his last year? Will he will he, what the Cardinals are, within a couple of games of a playoff spot at the trade deadline? Does he go for it because this is his last run, or does he, hold back because these are pieces for Hein Bloom? I don't know. I think he could go either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I mean, this year could be disappointing, but it will not be boring. There'll be a lot to pay attention to, and there'll be a lot that determines the path forward, and it'll be interesting to watch and to write about. And let's hope it's not disappointing, but no matter what, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's more than we could say for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean,
last year was really boring for me. I mean,
yeah,
I'm glad they got that winning season. I'm glad some certain things happened, but it was a pretty boring year.
Yeah, I mean, they had that nice run for 6 weeks, and then it was just kind of a win one, lose one type of thing. And there's not a whole lot except. And then 23 was interesting, but not in the good ways.
Not in the good way. Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
We don't necessarily want to repeat that. So
I mean, getting in a car wreck is sort of interesting, But
yeah,
that was kind of 2023. Yeah,
yeah. And I think, man, to some degree, it probably was a needed shock to the system, right? I mean, not just for the organization, but for the fans as well, to know that, hey, we've kind of relied on 500 baseball or playoff contention for 20 something years. It's not always guaranteed.
You're right. Yeah, yeah, it's not. And I remember, and this is sort of, I think of this conversation reduced to a singular moment in that I kind of turned my wife into a baseball fan and a Cardinals fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Game 6 in 2011 afterwards saying, it's not like this very often. This kind of don't make this the standard. This kind of game doesn't happen often. And that's kind of the larger conversation with Cardinals fans who are kind of blinkered toward nothing but, 2000 through 2022, that doesn't always happen. This is kind of an aberration unless you're a Yankees fan. So don't expect this until you reach the grave that the Cardinals are going to be good and relevant and championship worthy almost every year.
Yeah, but so many of this and I can say this as a bit of an older person, so many of these people have grown up not knowing anything else, right? I mean, that's the fact of 2.5 decades of excellence is, you've got a huge chunk of your fan base, especially your online fan base, that doesn't remember the end of the 90s or the 70s or all those downtimes that the Cardinals have had.
I mean, I still have a soft spot for the 96 team because they broke a drought. That was during my, teens and 20s and that kind of thing. So, it can and does happen,
Yeah. Yeah. We don't, and I'm sure that fond spot of that 96 team does not include the end of that 96 team.
I threw my remote out an open window when Tom Glavine tripled in Game 7.
There are times, you just know. So we've talked a little bit about the hitting side, especially, but have there been people, I mean, again, taking with all the stats and everything with a grain of salt, but have there been people that have kind of stood out to you this spring, both hitting or pitching?
Victor Scott, the second. I mean, I kind of wrote about him earlier, but I just he looks so much more smooth and athletic at the plate now, and it's the leg kick helps and that kind of thing. But even beyond just the leg lift and that sort of thing, which was missing from his approach for too long, he looks like a hitter. That's the simplest way I know how to put it. So that really made an impression, even beyond the fact that he's had very good numbers this spring. Ivan Herrera stands out. I think he's always looked ready to hit. You know what I mean? He always looks like he's about to launch one. Just that very aggressive stance and stride and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of his offensive potential. And he's one that stood out. We already talked about him, but Tekoa Roby before he got dispatched to minor league camp, just really impressive with that high fastball and just the way he rides that vertical break and just fools hitters with it. And it's just if he can stay healthy, I really think he's got some promise at the very least as a high leverage reliever. So, but health is obviously a big unknown for him. But I'd say Scott and Herrera are the guys who really stand out for me so far.
Yeah. And I know you wrote a very good piece about Victor Scott. Going into the spring, I was 100% sure he was going to Memphis. With his strides that he's made, and Siani can still obviously play defense, but his offense has really, really, really struggled even for him this spring.
Right.
I don't know that I believe it, but I think there's a non-zero chance that Siani's the odd man out and Scott gets to play a lot more in center than we thought.
I think that's a real possibility. And part of me still thinks they will default to a Newt Barnes center to go offense first. But I'm starting to think that the second most likely option is Scott gets the job. And I just, God bless Siani's glove, but the man just can't hit. He just can't. Now, he had a few moments last season, but after he came back from the IL, especially, and going into the spring. And this is one of those guys who I sort of pay attention to the spring numbers because he's absolutely fighting for a job. Yeah. And I just don't think he can hit enough to be a major league regular. And, if you have the roster space, he's an excellent defensive caddy out in center. But, it's going to be a crowded roster no matter what happens. So I just don't see that as a possibility. I would put Scott ahead of him in the queue right now. Now, if it comes down to, Scott or Siani for a bench role, it's obviously Siani because I don't think they want Scott sitting on the bench. They'll have him play every day in Memphis. But I think there's a real possibility that he wins that job, Scott, that is.
Yeah. And again, some of these decisions are, who's making them? Are we going to have the old Cardinals or the new Cardinals or whatever the case may be? But yeah, I think, I'm wondering how they'll, deploy Donovan and maybe they'll just use him as that utility guy instead of being a regular outfielder. And maybe that, as much as they want to talk about giving the runway to Nolan Gorman, maybe, he gets a little bit more time at second if Nolan struggles out of the gate. I don't know how much runway is runway,
Yeah, this is, once again, Marmol has been given a complicated roster, and no matter who makes it, it's going to, again, be a complicated roster. So it's, it's just, it's going to be, the roster reveal is going to be very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you've written just recently, especially about you're on Promore Mall. I guess is how I should try to say it if my mouth would work. And I agree with you. I think that he's gotten a little bit of a bad rap on this kind of stuff. I think this is a roster that would be difficult for anyone, but I think, obviously if you look at the managers that the Cardinals have had over recent years, I think you'd rather him manage it than, of course, Mike Matheny.
Right. Yeah. And, I'm not necessarily saying he's in the top tier of managers. I'm just saying I don't think he's a culprit for what's going on.
Right.
And I think he strikes a nice blend between, player friendly and intensity and accountability and that kind of thing. And he's not a raving maniac in the dugout. He's not one of these sort of pushover type managers who doesn't apply any order and discipline and that sort of thing. I think he strikes a nice balance, and I'll repeat that I think he's had a complicated roster pretty much every year he's been manager. And I don't think the Cardinals lose a lot of games in the dugout. I think it goes beyond that. And part of this is a football, basketball mentality that's imported to baseball, and that things aren't going right, the guy in charge has to go, and that's
right.
He's a manager. He's not a head coach, but we tend to treat him like the head coach and think that, first thing that needs to happen is get rid of that manager, and that's going to fix everything. And that's just not, it's not a tactically involved role. You can't just implement a new system and all of a sudden it meshes, and, it goes beyond that. So we tend to blame the manager for first line failures like that. And it's not always fair. And I think that's the case with Marmol.
And we've gone past the manager's icon stage.
Right.
There's not the Tony La Russas and the Sparky Andersons. I guess probably the closest thing is Terry Francona in Cincinnati, and we'll see how that works. But
Yeah.
I think that now it really is finding those slim margins and a pitching change here or a pinch hit spot there, and that's to some degree the manager and some degree the statistics that get fed to him.
Yeah, I mean it's a first do no harm kind of job,
Mm-hmm.
and and that was something Matheny was very bad at, and that he seemed to seek out harm, and so yeah, I think Marmol is the most tactically adept manager we've had since La Russa, and I like Schilt as a manager. I just think that Marmol is a little more tactically adept is the word.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't see him as anything like the problem.
I wonder if Matheny would have a better run with the DH to stop his double switches.
That would certainly help the necessary double switches. Yeah,
I guess he did better in Kansas City. So with that,
yeah.
yeah. So where do you come down? Because that's one of the things that's been buzzed around some this winter because we have nothing else to talk about. Legends in the dugout. Albert Pujols is managed in the winter ball and is looking at maybe managing again. Yadier Molina, of course, has been not actively but somewhat actively campaigning to be a manager at some point in time. Are you on the camp of if these guys are going to manage, you want them to be in St. Louis, or are you the opposite?
I think I'm neither.
Mm.
I think if that is their wish, and then I wish them fulfillment. If they want to be a major league manager, then I hope they get that opportunity. If it is an organic opening in St. Louis, as in the previous manager was fired for underperformance or decided to retire or whatever, fine. If it is we better get rid of Marmol so Pujols can manage, even though Marmol we know is not the problem, then I don't want it to happen. I don't want it forced. If it's if it's a genuine need for a manager in St. Louis, and he is determined to be the best. I'm thinking in terms of Pujols, just because I don't know. I think that would. I don't know. I think that would introduce less chaos than Molina as manager for whatever reason. And so, yeah, if again, if it's a defensible hire and not something that's contrived and forced, then yeah, sure. It's not going to change. If it doesn't go well, it's not going to change my fondness for Pujols, the player, or Molina, the player, and that kind of thing. Which they're two of my favorites ever. But if they crap out as Cardinals manager, just compartmentalize and remember their playing days.
And that's fair.
Yeah.
I think I would have trouble. To some degree, I'd have more trouble criticizing them, maybe because of the aura that they have around them.
That's a fair point.
If you look back at it and you're like, well, he should have made, should have not stuck with the starter that long. It's like, but it's Albert Pujols and he probably knows what or especially Yadier Molina, he knows pitchers,
right.
I'm
not really going to doubt his pitching changes, Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So I don't know. And part of me does, I know how much grief the managers get, and I just don't necessarily like to see that, directed at legends, even if, like you said, at the end of the day, they're probably not affecting how people think about them, because they've got that level. I know, and then again, we go back to Mike Matheny, he was liked before he was manager, but he wasn't this icon of St. Louis. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it worked for Red. So
yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. No doubt about that.
A different era, of course, because all he had to listen to were the bleacher bums yelling at him instead of the idiots on Twitter. But
wholesome times. Yeah, yeah,
that is correct. So, when you look at the NL Central, how does it look to you? I mean, with everybody, kind of sorting their teams out now, who's the big threat?
I on paper, I think the Cubs are the best team, and I think it's by a reasonable margin. I just think they, although I don't think they made the most of the Kyle Tucker acquisition, and that I think dumping Bellinger in basically a salary dump trade was not wise. They also didn't reinvest the savings to any real extent. But Kyle Tucker potentially is an MVP. He might have been he might have been a top 3 or 4 finisher in the AL vote last year if he hadn't had the shin injury. He's a huge addition, and I think the young talent that's trickled in. I think they have a very stable rotation, at least front through middle, and I just think they look like the potential to get in the low 90s win total, and I think that's going to be plenty in the NL Central. I'm kind of on the fence. Cardinals, Brewers, Reds are kind of right there for me, a little ahead of the Pirates. Pirates, I think, are last place, although not a terrible team. I should probably learn to stop doubting the Brewers at this point, regardless of talent departures. Yeah. But here I am again doubting them. So yeah, I sort of see the Cubs as an A tier. Well, NL Central, so let's say a B tier, and then we'll put the Brewers, Cardinals, Reds right there together in the C tier, and then behind them the Pirates. So I think it's going to be a winnable division if certain things go right for the Cardinals, but I certainly don't think I can squint my way to calling them the favorites.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Cubs don't have Kyle Hendricks anymore, so that's a step.
There's that. Yeah.
Unfortunately, he's on the Angels. He'll probably pitch in that second series that the Cardinals have of the season. But yeah, I'm very interested to see how that talent on Pittsburgh and Cincinnati starts to develop, and if they, because there's always that team, right? There's always a team that makes more of a jump than you think that they should,
right. Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if it's going to be one of those. I mean, and if it's Cincinnati, of course, a lot of it's going to go, as we were talking about managers and icons, to Terry Francona. But
I mean, I really think a lot of Francona. Yeah, I really do think a lot of him as a manager, and that factor is not to be dismissed, I don't think.
Yeah, because I mean, they've got all the talent, but they've had it for the last year or two, right? So if they can kind of shape it and mold it, then who knows what can happen.
Yeah. So it's
and then.
Yeah, it's interesting division. That's sort of the word of the night. Interesting. I keep saying that, but yeah, it is going to be good television without being the highest quality, baseball, but it's going to be fascinating to watch. And it's I mean, would any of the teams in the division winning it truly shock me? No, that's just how jumbled it is, and how kind of low the ceiling is, I guess.
Yeah, because I mean, just and again, it's baseball. What injury,
right?
As things are this close, could shuffle the decks quite a bit, depending on what that injury is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have not been one that has been excited about this balanced schedule, but I think a year like this, it even makes it even more of a downside, because being able to see these teams 16, 17 times a year and really get a feel for who's the best, I really would like to see that.
Yeah And I just as a Cardinals fan, I remain thankful that the Cubs just refuse to press their market advantage in this division. I mean, it's in terms of revenues, they have such a huge advantage over the rest of the division, but the Ricketts just will not push it, and may that continue.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, because there's a decent chance, right, that Tucker walks at the end of the year and they slide back down, back down to that C tier next year if they're not going to spend any money.
Tucker's first impression of them as an organization is an arbitration fight. So may he walk far away. Maybe to St. Louis.
Yeah. I mean, even though we have 100 outfielders, I think they'd find a place for him.
I'd make room for him. Yeah,
that's right. Clear out something. So yeah, I think it will be fun to see.
Yeah.
Since you do cover the rest of the league, where are you? Like, what's your World Series prediction if you were going to make one now?
I hate to be boring here, but I'm just going to say the Dodgers again, considering they put foot on the gas, even with a 98 win World Series champion team. They added pieces, and they are, I think, pretty easily the best team on paper. I have not yet formulated my AL pick just because it's such a jumble, but I am tempted by the Mariners, believe it or not. I don't think they're a great regular season team. I think they have the potential to win that division, but I think they have a couple of star players in Julio Rodriguez and yes, I'm calling Cal Raleigh a star because I think he's one of the most underrated players in baseball. And they have a deep and potent rotation, and I think there's just that potential to. They seem like a team that could win 88 games and then make the World Series, or 86 games even. They just kind of strike me as that sort of team. Now I haven't don't quote me on that. I haven't yet made my AL pick, but they're one that I'm thinking about. I probably would have said Yankees before the Cole injury. Probably would have been really boring and picked a World Series rematch, but I see. The AL's just not good. I mean, they've been in a down cycle for a bit, and they saw some talent drift on the free agent market this winter. And it's the best AL team could probably be I don't know, fourth best NL team, fourth or fifth. So it's the NL bracket is going to be, I think, far more entertaining than the World Series.
Very possible. I mean, I feel like the Dodgers roster is a TARDIS. Because they have so many players and somehow cram them all in there. I don't really know how that works.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're right. It's hard to pick against a team that won but also, I mean, you have to appreciate a team that won and then went and did some more, right? Instead of just sitting and resting.
Not many people would win the World Series and then go add Blake Snell and Roki Sasaki and re-sign Teoscar Hernandez and that kind of thing. And then add, two lockdown relievers to their bullpen. It's the Dodgers are, it's obviously a discourse right now. And a lot of people are saying they're the problem. And no, it's the Pirates, the Guardians, the A's. Those are the problems. The Rays, the Marlins, the teams that are trying to win are not the problem.
I remember back at the dawn of the Moneyball era, if you will, all the good, smart teams were the poor teams.
Yeah.
And so it kind of balanced out. And we always felt like if the rich team got smart, then it was game over. And that kind of feels like that's kind of been what the Dodgers have done.
I mean, the Orioles used to be a punchline for spending too much, and now they're a punchline for not spending enough when they're when they have a World Series core,
Yeah.
Yeah. How things change.
And I mean, I don't want to look. I mean, we talked earlier about looking forward, and maybe we shouldn't do that. But I mean, end of next season is the end of the CBA.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know there's a lot of people that expect that not to go well.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any hope, do you think, of avoiding any kind of ugliness?
Yeah, honestly, I think the best hope is infighting among owners, and they can't get on the same page to develop a coherent strategy because there are your large market teams are tired of subsidizing. Basically, the Yankees and Dodgers and Mets are tired of basically paying for the payrolls of the Pirates and the Guardians. And there's these revenue sharing recipients who don't even invest what they get in revenue sharing. So, and they're going to push for, stricter limits at the top. They're going to push for increased revenue sharing, and the big boys aren't going to want to go along with that. So I think there's a real chance of an ownership schism that Manfred is not able to cross. And I think, and that could, lead them going into negotiations pretty half-cocked and uncertain of what they want to pursue. And I think that might be the best hope. Then again, they could just lock out the players until they figure out their own issues, So at this point, I expect some kind of stoppage, but it's still far away, and there's, time for that to change, and, we could be pleasantly surprised. But at this very early hour, I'm not optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of money in baseball, but everybody seems to want to make sure they have all that they can have and then some. And that is always a problem. So, and hopefully not. Hopefully, again, it's a situation that they can clear it up because, we're just sitting here talking about the Cardinals, and by the end of 26, we might be actually excited about them. And
right. I've had that exact thought. I was like, boy, isn't this going to be great if things line up perfectly in terms of player development? And, we got these young studs up and down the lineup, and they're, and then boom, another 94, 95 or something.
So before we wrap up, you have a pretty deep connections with the Cardinals and stuff like that. Give me give me your favorite Cardinal player, and then give me your favorite underrated Cardinal player.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Underrated is tough. Favorite Cardinal of all time is Ozzy.
Mhm.
Yeah, I too am 5'9". I think that resonated with me when I was a youngster, and he's just the guy I latched onto. I've
Oh, yeah.
always loved shortstops and center fielders and catchers. I've loved those premium
Mhm.
defenders, and I latched onto him early, and he's always just seemed like such a pleasant guy. From I've never met him or had any conversations with him or anything, but just from the outside, he's always just seemed like an affable, personable guy who makes time for fans and that sort of thing. And he's just always been my guy, and he always will be.
Mhm.
Underrated. I feel like Ray Langford is too easy to say. That would probably be my answer, but I think everybody feels like Ray Langford was underrated and appreciates him appropriately. I mean, I really did like Renteria a lot.
Yeah.
He's just such a steady presence at shortstop, both offensively and defensively. He's a guy that stands out as is that the guy I want to? We might have to revisit this. I might have to think about this more. My until further notice answer is going to be Edgar Renteria.
Okay.
Which
I
he's
am
up for the Hall of Fame, so I'm not sure if that's all that
well,
underrated.
but he's been
Yeah.
on the ballot, I think,
Right.
every year, right? Or
Right.
almost every
Yeah.
year. I keep track. He's been on the ballot more than anybody else for not getting in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course we have no idea what the fan support is. He could have just missed it a couple of years, but it just feels like it's a surprise to me for a guy that was, he wasn't part of the MV3, but he was a real good part of that team.
Oh yeah.
To not be in is a little bit surprising to me.
I think okay, here's an answer. And that once I reached the age of reason, if you will, I realized he was just an okay player, not that great, and I loved him, was Tito Landrum.
Okay.
He was one I latched onto very early in my Cardinals fanhood. I'm probably older than you are.
Not much.
But he just he's much better in my mind's eye as a kid than he was on paper. And that is he just always seemed to do something big at the right moment to me. At least that's my probably confirmation bias working. But he's a guy I latched onto pretty early. I believe he had 2 stints with us as well. And I was very excited when he came back and that sort of thing. And then later on, I was like, oh, okay, he was just sort of a guy. He wasn't like he wasn't as great as I thought he was. So
yeah,
that might be my answer.
But you say that I'm in the middle of reading, and the author is going to be our guest next week. It's Interstate 85. It's a book about the 85
nice.
series, but I just kind of reading the lead up into it, and they're talking about just recent reading about Tito Landrum making making that start after Vince Coleman got hurt and driving in runs and stuff like that. So those are the kind of moments, especially on the big stage, especially back when you weren't watching the game every day, right? I mean, you only saw them here. So those guys that had the big postseason moments were able to stand out in people's minds more.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. You're not as desensitized to it, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were correct about Ozzy. I've only had a couple of interactions with him, but they have been. The one I like to talk about was we were in St. Louis the year of the All-Star game, and it was at Fan Fest, a couple days beforehand, and we actually went to eat at his restaurant afterwards, and he came in and spoke to us on our way, and then he sat in a private room right off where we were, and my son, who was 3, I think at the time, was sitting at the table, and so Ozzy was talking to him, and did you go to the thing and all this stuff, and then he has, which actually turned out he and Willie, I think, were in there, had dinner. He comes back out, and I mean, I didn't even see him. He comes back up to our table and says, "Hey, thanks for coming." And so I asked him if he would get a picture with my son, and sure, got him up on the chair, and it was a great
Oh, that's wonderful.
So it is nice when you have those interactions with people and they confirm what you think about them.
Yeah, that is, and I'm glad to hear that, because that definitely confirms my priors. Yeah. But he's just like the backflip on a cool October night before a playoff game was just let's watch some baseball. You know, that still gives me chills, man. Yeah.
And I hate, I hate to put anything like that on because nobody's going to be Ozzie Smith again, but I really like the start of Mason Wynn's career, and
I love watching
some of the stuff
Yeah.
that he is doing
Yeah.
gives off that Ozzie vibe a
Yes,
little bit.
absolutely it does. Yeah. I mean, Ozzie may be the greatest defender at any position in baseball history, and that's not just a Cardinals fan talking. So yeah, you're right. That's not a comparison you want to throw on any shortstop defensively, but Mason Wynn is so fun to watch. Yeah. He's just, your eyes drift to him on a ground ball. You know what I mean? It's just, he's fun. He's really fun. And that's an important quality, obviously being good is the most important thing, but being entertaining in a good way,
Right.
Players who are entertaining in not a good way, but entertaining in a good way is important from a fan standpoint.
Yeah. And I've said this, as they've come up, but if Mason Wynn and Jordan Walker and Victor Scott II are all on the team and all doing well, I think has to help too, right? But their personalities are going to revamp how people think about the Cardinals.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. They will bring an energy and a presence that this organization sorely needs. That something different while also being very good. Yeah, that is the hope, and that is I could not agree more with that, because they will bring something that has been lacking for what feels like a long time. May not actually be that long, but it feels like it.
Yeah, it's there's a difference between swagger and professionalism, and I'm not going to argue that one is better than the other, or whatever the case may be. But like you said, it is different.
Yeah.
To see those guys.
Yeah.
Well, Dayn, it has been fun.
Yeah,
what have you got working on? And I mean, either for Birdy Work or for the day job.
We'll keep it to Cardinals here. It's I'm going to try to knock out a piece tomorrow, just reacting to the Phil Maton signing and talking about the catching situation, and then probably some unnecessary fretting over Andre Palante. Those are my tentative plans for tomorrow when I write.
Yeah. That's I look forward to it, because I don't know if the fretting is unnecessary or not. I guess I look forward to seeing what you think.
Yeah. Well, I'm still sorting it out myself, I think.
All right. Well, next week we have, like I said, Marshall Garvey, who's writing the book on Interstate 85. Looking forward to that. But until then, for Dayn, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Alisea, the second for one, the double play. What a double play by Ozzie Smith. Oh, mercy.